Hello, Language and Media Literacy class. Today, my group members and I will be presenting the core media literacy skills. Allow me to introduce the presenters today. Diana DeSantis, Teresa Fountain, Megan Kulik, Maria Michelli, and Lauren St. Dennis. We encourage you to go through the reading scene here from pages 37 to 60 to better understand media education for the 21st century. Today, we will be focusing on the following 6 core media literacy skills: distributed cognition, collective intelligence, judgment, transmedia navigation, networking, and negotiation. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Lauren St. Dennis, to discuss distributed cognition.
The first core media skill that we will be discussing is distributed cognition. This article describes distributed cognition as the ability to interact meaningfully with tools that expand our mental capacities, supporting the idea that an individual's understanding of and actions in the world are not a product of that one person's individual decisions and behaviors alone, but rather influenced by social and technological means, which is meant by it being a cognitive skill that involves thinking across the brain, body, and world. Simply put, there are many resources out there today that help us reach and expand our human capacities. This media skill focuses on our reasoning that wouldn't be possible without the many tools we have today, and especially knowing how to use these tools effectively. To further explain this, the article discusses how most teachers encourage students to bring scrap pieces of paper into math tests to help them solve problems. Because as teachers, we recognize that students need to record and see their problem solving. Yet, technologies that are now a big part of our lives, and specifically put in the article, interwoven with our thinking, are seen as cheats and often discouraged. Have you ever been in a class where they've told you can't use a calculator for your test? This is kind of the same idea. This media skill wants us to understand cognitive activity as distributed among many people and artifacts, and students need to use these tools as they would their own minds. It is not only about technologies. Distributed cognition is also about social groups and the institutions we rely on. One analogy I discovered through my research on distributed cognition that really helped me understand it was the metaphor of flying an airplane. Although when we go on a flight, we believe that our individual pilot is responsible for our safe arrival, we usually thank them on the way out. In reality, there's so many people who play a huge role in our flights that we don't even see. It's not one single person or machine, it is distributed over many people, sensors, machinery, which are inside the plane and on the ground. Controllers, pilots, crew, all make it happen. So that's something that I found that really helped me understand this. As future teachers, I believe we can all agree with this view of intelligence. We see in our classrooms every day how students use technologies to learn new ways of reasoning that they have never done before, or that we've never done before. We see them exploring with their peers and learning from each other. I believe they are the best example of thinking across the brain, body, and world.
Hi everyone, my name is Teresa, and today I will be discussing the next core media skill, which is collective intelligence. According to the article, collective intelligence is the ability to pool knowledge and compare notes with others toward a common goal. Individuals collaborate online and share information to develop learning resources. When people work together, they create knowledge and discussion that cannot be succeeded on an individual level. There is an abundance of knowledge to be discovered worldwide, and not one person knows everything. Therefore, it is so important to work together. This core media skill coincides with teamwork because of the collaboration that takes place when developing such resources. Wikipedia is a website that supports collaboration. People from around the world are able to add points about various topics. Technology allows collective intelligence to occur on a daily basis. Individuals can not only connect with people around them, but also connect with partners across the world. Groups can meet through video calls, which can allow them to share screens and present different materials during their meeting rather than just a standard phone call. As educators, we should be supporting collective intelligence within our classroom. When providing students with the opportunity to participate in collective intelligence, their knowledge is expanded and deepened because they are learning from each other through discussion about various topics. A website that supports collective intelligence is Padlet. Padlet allows students to collaborate by having them provide information about different topics for the entire class to see. When presenting a topic, students simply use their iPads or laptops to type on sticky notes about the topic, and that sticky note is shared with the class. This is one of the many websites that can be used to support collective intelligence. In your classroom, it is important to create a safe environment so students feel comfortable to collaborate with their peers and share ideas with the class.
The next core media literacy skill that we are going to discuss is judgment. According to the article, judgment is viewed as the ability to evaluate the reliability and credibility of different information sources. As individuals, students, and even adults, we are often taught what to think rather than how to think. We are often only provided with one perspective on a particular subject matter, controversial topic, and/or guided to a conclusion that suits the masses. In the article, it talks about associating knowledge as a product, but within collective intelligence, knowledge was seen as a process. Collective intelligence, which was previously discussed, focuses on the ability to compare notes and resources with others worldwide to achieve a common goal. Judgment, however, encourages and allows for those various members to come together to act jointly in distinguishing and displaying the truth for others to view. An example of this is seen through the website Wikipedia. Wikipedia is an enormous online encyclopedia constructed entirely through the efforts of volunteers using wiki technology. Together, these volunteers work to ensure that the information being displayed on each of these various web pages is accurate and up to date. The downfall to this, however, is that because Wikipedia is a non-secure website that allows collaborators to actively participate in the gathering and displaying of knowledge and information, at times the information presented before you can be inaccurate. This then enables the judgment component within each of us to decipher the difference between fact and fiction. In the article, it also alludes to the idea that schools should always be teaching and providing students with tools, knowledge, and skills required to critically think about the quality of information they are presented with. Students need to be encouraged to ask those critical questions such as, what was the point of? What would it be like if? And what other outcomes may have happened? And so on. The quote that stood out in my mind while reading was, "The new mediated landscape of mainstream news sources, collaborative techniques aimed at ever younger consumers demand that students be taught how to distinguish fact from fiction, argument from documentation, real from fact, and marketing from enlightenment." Students often tend to believe what they are told, as well as taught to never question their teacher, which is seen as a superior to them. I believe that young children, students, and even adults should constantly be challenging the information they are presented with and trying to develop a deeper, more meaningful understanding of the purpose behind it. It is important that we are equipping each of our students with the ability to decipher what is true fact and what is false fiction. These are skills that will assist our students in the future and in other aspects of their lives.
The next core media literacy skill that we are going to discuss is transmedia navigation. Transmedia navigation is the ability to deal with the flow of stories and information across multiple modalities. Transmedia stories are told across multiple media. In cases where there is a very significant story, this is told across multiple media platforms. Multimodality can lead to conceptual problems. As a consumer, you're pulling together information from multiple sources. Storytellers such as advertisers and networkers use this storytelling to exploit their intellectual properties across many different channels. Stories with a lot of significance tend to be spread across many media platforms. Consider the Pokemon phenomenon. Pokemon isn't something that you just read or watch, it's something that you do. There are several hundred Pokemon, and each Pokemon has different variations through evolution, rivalries, and attachments. There's not one specific text for information about Pokemon. There are so many different sources online, in books. A child would assemble their information about Pokemon through many different information outlets. So, for example, they might look at YouTube videos, they might have a couple books on Pokemon, and they might maybe read some articles online about Pokemon. Multimodality can lead to conceptual problems. Youth today are encountering these problems regularly due to their participation in contemporary media. It is important that educators are taking these issues into account and ensuring that communication is taught comprehensively in all forms. Not only should written and oral communication have high importance, graphics, music, and cinema should also have importance, to name a few. With the advances in technologies and the different media sources, it is very important that students today understand all ways in which they can communicate and navigate. Educators can make sure that students are taking time to focus on stories and focus on how they change as they move across different contexts and different sources of the media.
The next core media literacy skill that I will be touching on is networking. When I chose networking for the core media literacy skill that I would discuss, I assumed it meant networking as in social media networking, creating connections with other people and using them as resources. However, I was extremely wrong and surprised when I read through the text. Networking is the ability to search and decipher through different search engines and figure out which is most appropriate and accurate for what you are looking for. For example, when you're writing a paper that needs scholarly articles, we all know that you should not go to Wikipedia because it is not a professional and reliable source. This is because it is a platform that allows for anybody and everybody to add information to it. Through my university experience, I have learned to browse through Google scholarly articles and through Leti Library resources. However, when I was a young student in school, I was not taught these reliable resources and actually believed that Wikipedia was a reliable resource. A resourceful student is someone who is able to successfully navigate an already abundant and continually changing world of information, achieved by tapping into a myriad of socially based search systems. Networking involves the ability to navigate across different social communities. Networking is only partially about identifying the potential resources and also involves the process of synthesis, which is when multiple resources are combined to produce new knowledge. In the literature, they discuss how schools are beginning to teach youth how to search out valuable resources through fun activities such as web quests. Web quests are activities designed by teachers in which some or all of the information come from resources on the internet and allow for students to search the web safe and effectively. Students are given a scenario or task that requires them to extract certain information or images from a series of websites and media platforms and then compile their findings into a report. Throughout my placements, the schools that I attended all had laptops, Chromebooks, or iPads. I feel that this task and lesson is something that is definitely possible for all teacher candidates and teachers to try. This is important for students to learn because they need to understand that not all the information they see on the internet is accurate, and not everything that comes from websites or social media platforms is true. So they need to be able to decipher what is true and what is not, and what is accurate and what should be used when they are writing reports or discussions.
The next core media literacy skill that we will be discussing is negotiation. Negotiation is the ability to travel across diverse communities, discerning and respecting multiple perspectives, and grasping and following alternative norms. The new media environment has brought communities and cultures together in ways that would not exist without the media. Educators must ensure that students understand multiple perspectives and respect diverse views and norms. Everything about this process of this core media literacy skill ensures that individuals will be provoked by cultural difference. Individuals online encounter conflicting values and assumptions. Cyber communities are put together by individuals who would have never connected in the physical world. So, for example, people in Canada can speak to people in Italy if they have the same cultural background. Students must be able to develop skills where they are able to understand multiple perspectives. It is very important that educators help students understand how to be respectful and even embrace diverse views. It is important for students to understand different social norms throughout different cultures, as well as respectfully negotiate conflicting opinions. Educators can use negotiation skills as a way to bring diverse groups together. By using resources and other tools, they can provide students with ways to carefully listen and develop communication with one another in a deeper way. This type of skill learning and discussions have been going on in classrooms, but it is important to make sure that students are prepared for their future roles as citizens and workers. I also think that this media literacy skill is very important due to how many different cultures that we have in Canada. More and more in classrooms, we're seeing different diverse groups, and it's important that every student respects one another and that they understand their cultures.
Hi everyone, my name is Teresa Fountain. I'm Megan Kulik.
I'm Lauren St. Dennis.
I'm Diana DeSantis.
And I'm Marie Michelli.
And this is our group presentation on core media literacy skills.
So next we're going to discuss the points of contention we agree with. A point of contention we agree with is the quote, "Intelligence is accomplished rather than possessed." I feel like this point really stood out to me when I was reading this article. I think it really helped me understand the main idea of the media skill distributed cognition, which we discussed earlier. As a future teacher who has experience in the classroom, I have witnessed this almost every day in the classroom, and I'm sure you guys can agree. Students who come into the classroom from various educational backgrounds with varying abilities and skills show new learning occurring without prior knowledge every day. We see in our classrooms every day students using new technologies for new ways of reasoning that they have never done before. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any practicum experience that relates back to that?
I do. So in my classroom, I was in a grade 3 classroom, and we used a lot of success criteria, which I think connect to this quote. In the success criteria, we would basically write a chart of what is expected for the unit and what is expected for assignments. I think this shows that intelligence is something that students can work on. So figuring out how to understand a topic through the success criteria, they can just hit each point as the unit goes on. And it shows that some students might have to work a little harder to get to the point, but some students may have a better understanding of it, but they can all accomplish it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think setting out that success criteria definitely helps them know, okay, I'm going to hit this point within that unit. So I think it's easier for them to visualize what they're going to be learning.
Something I did in my placement, or that my associate teacher did, I should say, is her success criteria was pretty broad. And I felt like that was really good for the students just because they didn't have to do one specific thing, but they were able to explore different options and show where they excelled within a various topic, if that makes sense.
No, for sure, yeah.
So the next point of contention we agree with is one must understand where one is in the vetting process to know how much trust to place in any given piece of information. So we thought that this really relates to ways that students find information for paragraphs, papers, through any type of education, whether that be grade school, high school, or even in your undergrad. We think that for educators, it's super important for us to teach students what are effective and reliable sources of information. For example, in my placement, the students had to write paragraphs on cats and dogs, and instead of using reliable sources, a lot of the students were going onto YouTube and just watching videos. Although these YouTube videos may have some information, I don't believe that the type of videos that they were watching could be used as a reliable source of information. Although it was just on a paragraph about cats and dogs, this can relate and expand into other papers for years ahead. So if they think in grade 3 that YouTube is a reliable source, heading into maybe grade 7 or 8, they could still think that and possibly use misinformation on their papers. And if the teachers or educators don't show students resources and ways to figure out what is reliable and what can be trusted, it can be an issue.
I agree with that 100%. Like I said, in the judgment portion of the core media literacy skills, it's really important that students are guided in knowing what is fact and what is fiction. And even as a student myself, I have used a fact finder website where you put the article into the website and it will tell you whether it is based on fact or fiction and how much of the article is in fact and what is fiction, so that this can help our students to understand and decipher between truth. And I find that that's really important because a lot of times we're often just believing things that we're told. So students need to understand that information given to them at times is not always accurate.
Right. And I definitely think like that's our role as the educator, to provide our students with those resources to determine whether an article or a YouTube video is in fact like fact.
I like that resource you discussed, Megan, because I feel like as a student, like in grade school, that would have really helped me. Even like going into university, I really had trouble finding journal articles and things that were reliable just because I wasn't given that information as a young student. I was never taught that.
Yeah, I totally remember like in grade school looking at YouTube videos all the time. So, and I was never told not to do that. So definitely in the future, that is something that I personally will address like with my future students for sure.
I agree. Even for the longest time in grade school, our educators allowed us to use Wikipedia. And I never knew that Wikipedia was a platform with multiple collaborators collaborating to give the information that is put on it. I did not know that. So when I found out in high school that you weren't allowed to use Wikipedia, I was really confused and was like, I don't understand why. And they said that the information put on it can be inaccurate at times because anybody can post anything. I could go and post something on a Wikipedia page that isn't the truth, and it would be up to the moderator of that page to determine that that is not a true fact, and it would be up to them to take that down. So, I mean, just with the amount of Wikipedia pages that are out there and the amount of moderators that would have to be moderating that content, it can become inaccurate information left on there for days, weeks, years before they even notice that it's not true.
Right.
So
no, I completely
discussed it in our article that someone posted something on Wikipedia, and I think it was 134 days. It was wrong information, and it was like 134 days before it was corrected. So
yeah, like that's crazy to me. And then these poor students are reading these Wikipedia pages, thinking that everything is true. In the meantime, like not, and they have no idea. So they're definitely getting like not true like information, like certain things.
And I think it's important to note too that students are very gullible, not in a bad way. I think they truly believe what they are told from people in power, such as educator and their parents. So for them to be able to develop those critical thinking skills that allow them to think of what was the purpose of what I just read, or why was I asked to read this, or why is this truthful, and just kind of question those things within their life. I think that's really important, and it's important to even question teachers, like, why are you having us do this assignment? What is the purpose behind it? And that will only help them to develop a deeper and more critical lens in their life moving forward.
So points of contention we disagree with. So I wrote, although collective intelligence is an important core media skill, we must take precautions on what we believe to be true facts. Since there are many different individuals adding information, there may be some statements that are personal opinions rather than true facts. So this kind of goes hand in hand of what we just spoke about. So just like the Wikipedia pages, there are so many people around the world that are adding to these Wikipedia pages that are not true. And again, like students don't know that they're not true. So they're adding all these facts to their assignments and just to their knowledge. And then in the meantime, they're not true facts.
I also think it's really important to note that there's a lot of fake news out in the world. You know, there's a lot of articles that are written and published that appear to be from credited websites or credited news journals. And when you actually read it, it in turn is inaccurate and it's not truthful. You know, we hear different stories about different celebrities that are, you know, here, there, and everywhere. And then you kind of look into that a little bit further and you come to find out that that wasn't true. They never left the country. That was a lie. So, I mean, kind of noting and understanding that these are out there in the world and misinformation is happening all the time, it's even more imperative that us as educators are taking those steps to ensure that we are providing our students with all of the tools and opportunities necessary to succeed and be able to decipher between all of those truth and fictions.
I think it's also important for us to make sure that the information we're giving to our students aren't our own personal biases. So for example, if you were talking about in social studies, like the different political parties, like make sure that you're doing it from a neutral standpoint instead of, for example, like if you're a liberal, conservative, just to make sure that the students really have like a neutral standpoint of the information you're giving them.
Yeah, kids really hold on to the things you say. So that's super important because they'll remember that.
Next, we are going to discuss the broader issues related to education. So number one, do you think that each of the core media literacy skills are adopted by all educators? And number two, do you think that each of the core media literacy skills are equally discussed within the classroom and given the appropriate amount of attention they deserve?
So I do not think that all the core media literacy skills are adopted by all educators. I think we've seen this accurately with the pandemic, specifically with distributed cognition, which I discussed earlier, talking about how we use tools such as technology as part of our reasoning. I think with the pandemic, it's been clear that a lot of people are struggling with technology, specifically educators. Some older educators who have not had to use this type of technology are having trouble with it.
I think that a lot of the reasons that these teachers are struggling is that they haven't been provided with the right amount of information or training to use these types of things. Even just students, like you can tell that they're having trouble with technology. So for example, a lot of students in my grade 3 class really struggled with even logging onto their Tools to Go accounts. And the teacher herself also just struggled with technology in general. They didn't really use it in the classroom. So this class in particular, we're not able to have all of these core media literacy skills applied to their learning.
I agree. Even when we were going through, wanted to pick which core media literacy skill to examine further, the topic of what they actually related to were a little bit different. So I know that Maria did hers on networking.
Yeah, so when I originally chose networking, I assumed it would be like networking as in like social media and like making connections and, you know, using those connections to like, you know, understand, using them as like reliable resources and understanding information and content and So I was extremely surprised when I read the text and found out that it was actually not about that at all. So it was more about being able to go through different platforms and medias and being able to decipher which information is most important and most accurate and also appropriate. So it's really important for students to have this skill as well as the other core media skills, because this is something that they use in everyday life and they will use in everyday life eventually. And so I believe it should be taught more in depth within the classroom. And so to answer the question, do we think they are equally discussed in the classroom? I'd have to say no, because I myself did not know what networking was until I read the text, and I have a strong feeling that many of my colleagues feel the same way and that many of the students would agree as well. And so I do think it should be a little more focused in the classroom.
I would have to say I don't think that they are, because if they were, then I believe that they would be kind of more integrated throughout, and focusing on what the group previous to us said, they focused a lot on play. And in the articles in which we read or read, and the different grade levels that we would be educators of, play doesn't really find its way throughout all of them, and neither does judgment vice versa make its way into the younger grades, such as kindergarten. So I mean, these skills are really important, but we just need to, I think, present them better to our students.
Okay, so the discussion questions are: number 1, in your academic career thus far, what are some ways in which educators have assisted you in navigating your way through misinformation that can be found online? What are some of the ways that you can combat misinformation when looking for accurate information? Number 2, what type of technology do you, as either a student or educator, feel that you can rely on to act as a cheat or a clutch for you? Example, spell check or grammar check. And number 3, out of the 6 core media literacy skills presented, which do you find the most important and why? Explain your answer.
Thank you guys so much for watching our presentation or our workshop, if you will. We hope you've learned a lot of information about the core media literacy skills, and please do not forget to complete the discussion board questions. Thank you.